Hello, everyone. Another Ray Music Living Room Talk, again connected with our upcoming premieres concert, formerly known as Four New Works, but under the COVID restrictions, we're back to a bunch of solo pieces pre-recorded. So this one, I'm really happy to have Seung-Won Oh on this concert, and this is unfortunately Seung-Won's original piece was a chamber music piece that the piece that she wrote for us is one of the ones we've had to postpone until a non-COVID restricted date. So stay tuned in the future for that. But in the meantime, we are going to perform a piece that is a piece that I've wanted to program for myself for a long time. I've admired Seung-Won's music for quite a long time now, and it's really wonderful to have her on the Ray Show. So without further ado, Seung-Won, it's really great to see you.
Great to see you, David. Thanks for the invitation for talking. Yeah.
Well, thanks for. It's been a long saga. Unfortunately, this piece, this commission, the original plan. I mean, this is now the second year in a row that COVID has postponed this, so it's getting a little tiresome. And I'm looking forward to having all this behind us. But if you could talk a little bit about your background as a composer and your sort of path to where you are now. And we'll talk a little bit about Circle, which, although it's a Canadian premiere, it's actually quite an old piece for you now.
Yes.
So we'll just go from there. So yeah, where tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Seung-Won Oh. I'm originally from South Korea, and I had my education in Korea as well as in the US and eventually in the Netherlands. Quite a lot of people like me, international nomad, continuing now. So I studied composition from my high school period when I was in Korea. And I think only when I came to the Netherlands, when I became quite mature as a composer, then I think I really understand what becoming a composer is. And I think I had recognized as more like a composer who combines Western and Eastern culture together in the Netherlands. And that's how I kind of was categorized or shown as a Dutch music audience and internationally as well. But that is, I think, one side of me. And nowadays I'm trying to think more about my relationship with composition as not just me and my composition, but with the composition, I pursue the relationship with the musicians involved. And also lately the audiences that I wasn't really paying attention a lot when I was a younger composer, that I realized it becoming more and more important in my inspiration as well. So I would say the sound world that I'm trying to create is not only me and my notes that I'm writing, but with the relationship of that particular musicians and their instrument, as well as that music or sounds that I'm creating, the relationship with the audience. It's becoming more and more important. And these days I had because everybody as well, because the COVID, a lot of things has been changing last 2 years now, in our third year now. I had ups and downs, especially because of projects that I was involved was a quite big scale. And a lot of pieces had been canceled. And through that period, what I really learned is that what can I do to make my music more sustainable in this kind of environment? I think because of my recognition as somebody who's combining two different cultures, I got a lot of commissions which involves very particular instrumentations or special events. And that requires sort of like, everybody come together for one that specific event, and more or less that opportunities are hard to repeat over and over. Yeah. So over a period of time, I would say about last 10 years now, I'm gradually thinking that what can I do to make my music more sustainable in a way. That we could be not only artistically communicable, but also to be able to be programmed enough and have a more communication with the audience, because I really realized that if my music, stays in the paper, that's just notes in the paper.
Yeah, that's always such a challenge for composers, right? Because these opportunities, these really specific opportunities come along and they're really, really interesting. Like they're really exciting and fun. Like it's a fun challenge to do these things. And I come up, this works, it happens with me in a small way, and smaller scale with percussion. But but at the same time, these things are a little bit of a trap, right? Because it's such a specialized circumstance where these disparate things can come together, and it actually, this is an interesting little bridge into Circle. So Circle is a solo percussion piece, and I'm not playing it. Unfortunately, my friend Tyler Cunningham, a fabulous young percussionist, is playing it. But it's a piece that I've wanted to program for a really, really long time, but I don't have the gongs. You know what I mean? And this is like, in a small way, this little problem, right? Because it's a fabulous piece. But one of the reasons that I have never learned it is it requires it's not a wild requirement, but you have to happen to have access to a set of pitched gongs. And they're small, they're not like gigantic, enormous instruments. But it was written for Claire Eduardes, right? And she happened to have these, I assume.
She's
so
she was traveling at Thailand, and I think she said that like local just on the street market, some of the gongs were being sold for very, very good price, and then she said, like, I'm going to buy all of them. And then when she came back from the trip, she said, like, I would like you to write a piece for me using all these gongs.
Which is such like a typical, like, classic percussionist thing to do. Like, look at all the stuff I've got, and the same, I've done the same thing to composers for years and years, and I'm sure that several of those pieces are just languishing. No one else is playing, because I happen to have like a really specific object that this piece sort of rotates around, but like, it's a great piece. Like, I wanted to do it for so long, and I know Tyler's really, really enjoying it. So can you talk a little bit? So it was really written kind of around this set of instruments.
Exactly. So I think I cannot remember exactly. It's so long time ago that I wrote the piece. I think that it involves about 7 pitches. Yeah.
Just to be clear, it's like 2003, right? It's really quite a while ago.
Yeah, and then it's premiered 2004. So she came with this 7 gongs, I believe, and I had to think about using the gong in not traditional way that I've seen before, because a lot of gongs were played as sort of like, background or occasional ringing piece, but because it was a much smaller gong, and I really wanted to find a very unique way to use it, and also diverse way to use the composition, more interesting and evolved and organic growth. And what I came up with is that, well, what if I use the gong in not gong way, meaning not, putting the gongs in the rack. So I started with muting the gongs on the table, using it as almost like a gamelan in a way. And back then, I didn't quite understand about gamelan music just yet, but I had aware of that pitched gongs I used in gamelan music. And then also I wanted to involve some other instruments, different kinds of sounds, such as woodblock, which is very different quality of the sound. And I believe there's 2 bongos, high and low, as well as the wind gong. So I wanted to make some sort of stage of a block of music, which involves a growth of very, very rigid rhythm, but gradually introducing one instrument at a time. So it has almost like a chapter after chapter. And at the end of each chapter, I introduce new sound. And then the idea is that gradually that the original statement that I composed at the first chapter will be more or less, becomes a much interesting sound world, including all this addition of the sounds towards the end of the piece. Um, and I was trying to be extremely rigid with the way that I use the sound. And so I said, okay, this is all I use. I'm not going to expand anything anymore. I'm just going to expand the music internally, not by using extra instruments. So that kind of gave me good limitation, which made me go into more depth how I make this interesting sound as compositionally. Yeah, that's how it all began.
Yeah, and it's incredibly cleverly done. I think all of that, and the way um, the way the gong sounds evolve. Because one of the, it's always a challenge with percussion instruments in a lot of ways because they don't. In most percussion instruments, it's very hard to. This is sort of another percussion trap, right? Because the instruments tend to make one sound, and they tend to, which is I think why like especially the sort of old like first generation classic percussion solos tend to just have ballooned in the number of instruments that they have, right? So you have these sort of classic things like Stockhausen and like burial circles, all these percussion pieces that are just, we call them the kitchen sink percussion pieces, where they're just like one of everything, right? And like I think a lot of the repertoire has a lot of been about like figuring out ways to scale, to like scale back and focus in, and how to work with smaller and smaller sets of things, And I think your solution and the gongs fit into this, right? Because they're each of them, traditionally just make one, pong, sort of sound. And I think that the solution that you come up with where you slowly hang them up is a really, is a really great one, because it does give you, I mean, first of all, the visual act is interesting. And then it gives you this sort of, you're able to extend the ideas around those instruments in a very sort of, you're able to extend the piece, using a smaller set of objects, and keep it interesting. And also it's still, and it maintains but it's also still like, it's not like some wild extended technique, it's not some, you're not having to like, you're not having to scrape on it, you're not having to like put some weird objects on it. Like it's a very natural sort of progression, without some sort of distracting kind of theatrical element that you have to do. It's just a very sort of smooth transition. It's really well done.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned about it doesn't require good technique, of course, but I don't think I'm doing any extended technique.
No.
But instead, what I really wanted to do is, for instance, when I'm introducing one new instrument, I think if I can try to think back what I was thinking, there's always the introduction of a one instrument role for extended period of time. The reason that I did that is back then, like, when is the last time that I heard like snare drum sounded gradual crescendo and decrescendo over like 1 minute of time, because there's so much happening, not just in terms of the technique, but how the sounds evolves and the intensity evolves. And we just don't get a chance to hear the extended one sound just being extended as much as possible. And I felt like this is opportunity that I can do that. So when I use bongo, I do that. I did it with a wood block and so on. So that it's like not looking at the landscape of everything, but you're going into the sort of like going into the microscopic idea about the sound. And one of the percussionists is based in Chicago, John Corkill. He was also very inspired by this piece, and then he did think about, this would be a great piece to do a video recording because there's a lot of action going on, which is sort of more or less zooming into the one kind of technique of rolling for 1 minute, for instance, which comes with an interesting sound and spectrum of the sound as well. So I wasn't necessarily thinking about the whole idea, but the theater, but eventually became quite choreographed-wise a theatrical piece as well. And as there is a progression of the gong becoming, traditional sense of the gong at the end, and then eventually finishing with just very simple pentatonic scale at the end, which gives more meaning because of what happened all the time, before 10 minutes of work, for instance. So it is somehow gradually that idea about evolving organically, introducing one more sound at a time. And after I named the piece, actually, I realized, oh, it could have been spiral as well, because you come and gradually going upward and expanding. But if you just trace the line, this is circle, but it's like three-dimensional, it's more like a spiral.
Right.
Then I think from then on, my ideas about the theatrical element, and especially the percussion, became more important. Last 10, 15 years, the idea of theatrical element become more evolved in many different angles and many different perspectives. And the idea about, when I was just breaking out, I was a professional composer in the Netherlands. I had a great opportunity to work with the Slagwerk Den Haag, percussion group The Hague.
Yep.
So I worked with them for extensive time and spent a lot of time with them in their studio, going through the instruments and all that. And I was very fascinated by not the sound only, but the movement that involved in the percussion. Was such an amazing sort of inspiration, which gradually became solidified as I became much more, I would say, mature composer now. And that seems to just sip out of each piece without me really calculating.
Yeah, I always feel like percussion is such a gateway into that, into that stuff, because I always think that, like every instrument, I always feel like with every instrument, you sound like you move. You create the sound as a, direct result of how you're moving, whether it's a violin or whether it's a piano or whether, but it's just that with percussion, it's all the gestures are bigger and it's obvious, where you can see everything. And I always find that, that it tends to lead composers, for better or worse, in that kind of direction, Anything else you want to say about the piece before we let people go?
Well, I think I don't know exactly how the camera is going to work with this particular recording, but hopefully the camera will be able to show that sort of landscape of the percussionist, but also at the same time going into the sort of focusing on the one instrument, and so that me, if I was the audience looking at the video while I'm listening to it, because the perspective of the camera is such an important element, because that kind of guide the audience to listen to the piece in different way. So that I hope that the video will be actually extra layer that which could add to the composition. I just wanted to mention that this is my first percussion solo piece, which is now seems to be played more and more everywhere. I think if I didn't have the restriction of that 7 taigong, it would be more popular.
Yeah, probably.
But I think from this experience, my ideas about percussion with the choreography and also talking about some type of theatrical element, as well as the idea about certain sort of storytelling, something of the direction that I really wanted to pursue. And I'd like to work with the percussionist who's like equipped to do a lot of choreography and movement as extension of the sound. So for the future audience, maybe,
Oh, we should talk more about this.
The CEO, this is for the solo percussion when she was much younger, but now more interesting aspect of the more like music theater with the percussionist involving the choreography would be an interesting direction. So this could be like a sort of the little peep out of what could be evolved from.
Very cool. All right, so we'll stop recording now, and we'll let people listen to the piece on the 19th. So the broadcast is February 19th, and it's the Array Premieres concert. And thank you, Seung-Won. It's really great to talk to you about this stuff.
Thank you very much.